All right, so today I'd like to speak on an important topic, stewarding money. And back at Easter, we had a survey on what you'd like teaching on. This was one of the things that ranked fairly highly, stewardship. And stewardship is really, it's so important. And I'm really thankful for my parents. They taught me a lot about money from a young age. I don't know how old I was. I was little when I started receiving an allowance, and my parents taught me kind of right off the bat, you know, every Sunday you give from your allowance. So they taught me about tithing. My parents encouraged me to start working at a young age. I think I started cutting our grass at our house when I was 9. I remember when I was 13, I was cutting regularly 6 or 7 yards a week. That summer I started working construction. I worked about 30 hours a week when I was 13. So in 1987, as a 13-year-old, I was bringing home about $130 a week. That's not too bad. So my parents, they taught me how to track my money. They opened a bank account for me, and they really taught me a lot. I've definitely made some financial boo-boos, but they gave me a really good, solid foundation that's just stuck with me over the years. And so parents, it's really important that we teach our kids about money at a young age, because what we teach them or fail to teach them is going to be with them for a long time. And unfortunately, I think sometimes we can do a disservice by giving our kids kind of what they want, and rather than teaching them how to work for what they need. Obviously, money is super important. We couldn't function in our society without it. And how we handle our money is a key to the level of blessing and favor that we are able to receive from God. How we handle money is a key to blessing and favor. Jesus said this, Luke 16:11. He said, "If you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven?" So how we handle money, it directly influences the level of blessing that God can give us. So last week Ryan was here. He spoke about being surrendered to God, and money is an area of our lives that we must learn to surrender to Him. Jesus said this in Matthew 6:24. He said, "No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and you will despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money." So really, it's not possible to be surrendered to God if you're surrendered first to money, if you're enslaved to money. Now, the word that's used in this verse is not money. It's actually the word mammon, which is a proper name. Mammon is the Syrian god of wealth. So you cannot be fully surrendered to God if you are submitted or serving the spirit of mammon. Now, money in itself, it's not evil. Money is actually a really good thing. I don't know if you could imagine what the world would look like if we didn't have money, like if we bartered for everything. I mean, years ago, people used to pay for things in salt. How would you like to go buy a car and carry along all the salt you needed to pay for it? It just wouldn't be practical. So money, it's not bad, it's a good thing. It's not evil. What is evil is the love of money and the control that it can have over us. And so if we're not careful, if we're not fully submitted to God in the area of money, we may actually find that we're serving the spirit of mammon, which carries a lot of baggage with it. All right, so we want to be good stewards, and that's really what this is about. So to learn to be free from the bondage of money, to be a good steward, it's necessary that we learn how to manage God's money, because it's really His, and we need to learn how to live in a trusting relationship with God as our provider. And we may all be at varying stages of this, and it's going to be something we continue to learn and grow in, I think all of us. In the parable of the talents, Jesus showed us an example of what it is to steward God's money, to manage His money. So this parable is found in Matthew 25. And in this, Jesus, He talked about a master who gave 3 of his servants money. He was going on a trip, and He gave them money to invest, to work with in His absence. And so if you don't know what a talent, it's actually a weight of measure, 75 pounds. And so to the first servant, He gave them 5 talents of silver. So 5 big 75-pound bags of silver, approximately worth $200,000 in today's money. To the second, he gave 2 talents, approximately $80,000. And to the third servant, he gave 1 talent, so about $40,000. So the master, he goes on a trip. He comes home, and when he returns, he calls in his servants to see what they did. So the first and second servant, they had taken the money they received, they invested it, and they doubled it. And so the master was happy with them. He promoted them both. Now the third servant, he was afraid he might lose it. He was afraid of his master, so he hid the money. He didn't do a thing with it. When his master returned, he gave his master the original $40,000. Here you go. The master was furious. He called his servant both wicked and lazy. He took the $40,000 from that servant and he gave it to the first servant who had the largest quantity of money. He threw the servant into outer darkness where there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. Not a good idea. So this servant definitely didn't do what he was supposed to. How we handle money, it's a really big deal to God. If you look around at the things God created, if you look at the plants, if you look at animals, all of them increase. God created things to increase. So the servant, he didn't actually lose what he was given, but he didn't do anything with it. He didn't invest it. He did nothing. So the master was angry because he did nothing with it. There was no increase. Now, I want to say this. I don't believe God is just concerned that you get so many dollars and you increase it. You have a large bank account. In a response to a question from a rich man, Jesus said this: if you want to be perfect, go and sell all of your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. So it's not about having a big bank account. It's about, we have a treasure in heaven. We're investing in God's kingdom. God wants us to invest his resources, our money, our lives in his kingdom. Now, whether we realize it or not, everything that we have is on loan to us from God. Nothing you have is yours. Even your ability to earn money, whatever you have, it's given to you, it's on loan, it's God's, and we are simply managers or stewards of everything he has given to us. Now, when you look at God, he is extravagantly generous. He gave us his son. The price that Jesus paid on the cross to ransom you is beyond measure. The price he paid for you it's beyond, if you like, all of the value of everything in the world. So God, he is extremely generous towards us, and one way that we grow to become like him is to become generous ourselves. In fact, you could say generosity is a measure of how we are becoming like Christ. If I'm generous, well, I'm becoming more like him. Well, if I'm not, then, well, in that area, that's clearly I'm not surrendered to him. Stewarding or managing God's resources is kind of like walking on a narrow road, and it can be very easy to get off course. On the one extreme, on the one side, we can be spending everything we have on ourselves. We can be spending ourselves right into debt. On the other extreme, we may be scrimping and saving every penny and, just saving a huge bank account, but it's from the perspective of, I got to take care of me because nobody else is going to do it. So it's either I'm spending it all or I'm saving it all, but it's really all about me, and I'm not trusting in God. So a few things. What does it look like to actually steward money well? Proverbs 3, verses 9 and 10 says this: honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. Great, we don't want bad wine. Stewarding God's money looks like giving our best to him. And this is counterintuitive because we want the best for us, or we want the best for our families, but that's not stewarding our money. Rather, we're giving our best to God. All right, 1 Timothy 5:8. Got to be careful I read this right. Paul wrote this to Timothy. But those who will not care for their relatives, especially those in their own household, have denied the true faith. Such people are worse than unbelievers. So what is he saying there? Kind of the opposite of that. Well, stewarding God's money is taking care of our responsibilities. It's taking care of our families. You know, I can't go and neglect my family and then take that money and give it to God. He's not going to be very pleased with that. I've got a responsibility to my family. I can't not pay the electric company or pay whatever credit card debt I have and give that money to God because I'm stealing from somebody else to give to God. It doesn't work that way. We do give to Him, but we've got to take care of our responsibilities. We need to be providing for our families. Okay, so Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get." What is he saying here? Well, we shouldn't spend all we get. The wealth of the wise is there really because they've learned to hold back. They're not spending it all. So stewarding our money is not spending everything we get. It involves saving for the future. And James 1:27, James wrote this: "Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you." So stewarding God's money is, caring for those who are in need. So widows and orphans, especially at this time, these were people who had no one to care for them. It's looking out for those people and helping to provide for them. Now, all of us, we want security in life, right? There's a lie that says the more money you have, the happier you will be and the more secure you will be. And there's kind of a measure of truth to this, like going and buying things feels good. It makes you happy at least for a little while. Like having money, it provides a little bit of security, but really the opposite of this is true. The more you have, the less content you will be. I don't know if you're familiar with the name John D. Rockefeller, one of the wealthiest men in all of history. He was the founder of Standard Oil. He was the first billionaire. He said, "I have made many millions, but they have not brought me happiness." And you might know the name Henry Ford, started the Ford Motor Company. Very wealthy man. He is quoted as saying, "I was happier when I was doing a mechanic's job." So all that wealth didn't bring any happiness and it didn't bring any contentment. So money, it doesn't bring joy, it doesn't bring fulfillment. Having money is not a substitute for knowing God as your provider and for trusting Him. So just a little story about us. We've mostly tithed, maybe not at the very beginning of our marriage, but we have been careful to tithe and give. In 2006, we were preparing to go overseas to China. We'd done our best stewarding our money, and now we were kind of in a different position. We weren't needing to give. We were actually needing to raise money for us. Now, at the time when we were going over there as missionaries, I was going to teach in a university, so the amount of money we had to raise was not relatively a lot. I think it was like $35,000 a year, which may not be a lot, but it sure sounded like a lot to me. It was just like this huge mountain, like, oh my goodness, how do we raise that kind of money? I really didn't know what to do. I really did not feel we should be calling and asking people for money. What we did, we prayed about it, we let people know what we needed, and we prayed and we trusted that God would provide. And to be honest, this was so far out of my comfort zone. I was happy to give to others. I would have been more than happy just to save and spend my own money on this. But I knew that isn't what God was calling us to do. We needed to trust Him to provide. And He did. I remember very clearly the first donation we got. It was a one-time gift of $30. I know who it was from. And like, blink, that's like a little drop in the bucket, right? But we thanked God, and we just continued to trust Him, provide Him, and we saw all that money come in. As much as I didn't like being entirely dependent on God and other people to provide, it really taught us to surrender ourselves to Him in that area and just trust Him. I was not in a position where I could provide for myself. And since that time, we have seen God provide for us over and over and over. We served overseas for a total of about 9 years. We saw God provide a considerable amount of funds for us. Even moving in here, we've just seen God provide. So being good stewards and trusting in God and learning to know Him as a provider, that is the way to security. I'm not going to get there any other way. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at 3 specific keys for stewarding money, for managing money. Those are 1, living within your income. Sounds like a no-brainer. 2, saving and investing. And 3, giving back to God. And I don't know why I'm holding all 5 fingers up. I think I'm counting. Okay, so those 3 things, I didn't necessarily give them to you in order of importance. They're all important. Okay, number one, living within your income. Okay, 1 Timothy 6 through 10, I'm just going to read this whole thing. Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So, if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils, and some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. Okay, so what's he saying? In a nutshell, be content with what you have. And this is so not the American way at all. Like, we are constantly assaulted, especially in the media, with all the things that you have to have if you want to be happy. And in our country, spending is very much out of control. Currently, the average credit card debt, or not the average, but the credit card debt that American families owe right now is $1.2 trillion. That is the credit card debt that American families are carrying. That works out to an average per household of $10,500. Now, that's the average. We don't carry a credit card debt, so that means somebody else is carrying a lot more. That's the average. And that's significant when you consider the average interest rate on credit card debt is 20%. So if you carry $10,000 in credit card debt for a year, you're going to pay $2,000 in addition to that 10, and you haven't touched the 10 yet. Spending is out of control in some ways, and I'm not going to go into that, but I do want to say it's really important that we live within our income. And I get it, for some people it's not an issue, and for others it is, and I'm not going to go into those reasons why, and they can be legitimate. If you're not living within your means, there's really 2 things you can do. 1, 2. You can earn more money, or you can spend less. There's not a whole lot more you can do there. And so I'd like to look at controlling spending. Now, this might seem obvious, but the first step in controlling spending is knowing what you're spending your money on, because you can't improve something you're not measuring. I heard this story recently, and this might sound like it's out there a little bit, but there was a guy who earned a good salary, and he was going in debt. He was broke, and he really didn't understand why. He didn't know where his money was going, so he started tracking all of his expenses. And after a little while, he had a better understanding of where his money was going. And one of the things that surprised him was he was spending over $500 a month at Starbucks. Like every day, he and his wife would stop there on their way to work. That's a lot of money. I mean, that could be a car payment depending on the kind of car you drive. Knowing what you spend your money on is critical if you want to make any corrections to that. You know, if you don't know exactly how much you're spending on what, I would suggest that you find out as soon as possible. There's different ways to do this. Really down and dirty method is get a notebook and some pen and write down everything that you spend money on. I personally prefer a spreadsheet. Write down literally every single purchase, or type it in there. Every credit card expense, every time you use cash, every bank withdrawal, every automatic deduction. You need to have every single one of those things in there if you're going to figure out where's my money going and start controlling it. There are apps you can get for budgeting and tracking. I've tried some. My personality, I like a spreadsheet. We have a friend who does financial consulting. He recommends the Ramsey Plus app. It's called Every Dollar. This one is part of a package, which might be helpful, but there's a fee for it. So the things we want to do with this. One is we want to find out how much we're spending on what. And then second, we need to make a budget. Decide how much you can afford to spend within different categories based on your income. And it's got to be less than your total income. You want to allow for paying down of debt, for saving, for giving. If you're in a really tight spot, get counsel. This may be something you really just want to pray and seek God on. And He will show you what to do. He's a good Father. He's a good provider. He wants us to prosper, but sometimes we have to learn how to work with what He gives us. I will say keeping a budget can be challenging, especially if you do everything on a credit card. This isn't the only way. One way to budget is to do cash. How does that work? Well, at the beginning of the month, you know you need to spend $100 on all your expenses. Not really accurate, but we'll just use that. So you get out $100 and you have an envelope for all your different categories. I put 10 in here for food and 10 in here for clothes and 10 in here for household stuff. And you spend it throughout the month, and when that envelope's empty, well, you stop spending. Pretty simple. If you have money left over, well, then at the end of the month, you can decide what you're going to do with it. If you're going to buy something, put it towards debt, whatever. I will say when it comes to making decisions on budgeting, on spending, it is absolutely critical for husbands and wives to be on the same page. I can't decide this apart from her, and vice versa. You know, we have different perspectives on how to handle money, so really we need to be praying together and making decisions together regarding our finances, because we don't want to be fighting each other in this. Getting spending under control, for some people it might just be as simple as, okay, you make a budget and you stick with it. It could require some real strategizing, like, okay, I've got a lot of debt, how do I pay it down? How do I live within my income? But it's really critical to work through those things. You cannot live a life submitted fully to God if you are in debt, because money is controlling you. Again, we haven't done everything right. I wouldn't say we're necessarily role models, but we do tithe. And in addition to that, there have been times where God has prompted us to give generously to things on top of our tithing. One time we had a car we were thinking of selling, and God led us to give it to a pastor who needed a car. It was a nice car. I think we could have gotten a lot, but we were able to give it to him because we weren't in a place where we had to have that money. Another time there was a pastor, we were able to give him $10,000 towards a down payment on a house because he didn't have the money. And I think there was another time, there was a friend who was a missionary looking to buy a car. We were able to write a check for $5,000 and help purchase that car. Had we been swimming in debt, we wouldn't have been able to do any of those things. We can't be surrendered to God if money is controlling us. God, He wants to bless us so that we can be a blessing to others. I'll just kind of throw this out there. If you're struggling with any kind of addiction, it could be drinking, smoking, could be a shopping addiction, which I just can't imagine that, but that could be a problem for some people. Entertainment could be gambling. You might not even say, I have an addiction, but those things can be like a serious drain on your finances, and they can actually be a barrier to your relationship with God. So if you're struggling in those ways, I would just encourage you, get help. Any area where we're in addiction, that area is not surrendered to God. And He wants to help us with that. He wants to bless us. But the more we are surrendered to Him, the more we enable Him to bless us. He's not the problem. It's always something with us. Okay, so second, saving and investing. Proverbs 13:11 says, "Wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears. Wealth from hard work grows over time." Obviously, I think it's obvious, putting hope in get-rich-quick schemes is dangerous. I mean, that could look like gambling. It could look like high-risk investing. It could look like attempting to sue people and organizations. I know a particular individual who is always scheming to get rich. It's cost them in terms of their health. It's cost them in terms of their relationship. Literally, this person, their life is just passing them by while they're hoping to get rich. They don't have any friends. This is their whole life. What can I do to get rich? When we're focused on getting rich quick, or just, we're focused on how we can gain wealth, we're leaving God out of the picture, and we're creating a very shallow life for ourselves. Rather, wealth is to be gained with effort and over time. And part of gaining wealth is growing in the experience of earning and then actually managing money. But wealth, it's not a goal in itself. While I honestly believe God wants all of us to prosper, but He wants us to prosper in relationship with Himself. This is really important. God wants you to prosper in relationship with Him. So really, that's our goal. It's growing in relationship with God, not for the sake of becoming wealthy, but in relationship with Him. He's a good Father. He wants to bless us. And again, He wants to bless us so we can be a blessing to others. Proverbs 6:6 says this. I love this translation. Take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bones. Learn from their ways and become wise. Though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer, gathering food for the winter. Okay, so in some ways we want to be like ants. We want to save for the future. There's going to be unexpected things that come up, emergencies, things that we just need to plan for. I don't want to go into really much of this. If you're just starting out in life, if you're young, or if you just don't have savings, you might want to begin with the goal of saving up enough to cover your budget for a month. And then you could look to increase that 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. 2 Corinthians 9:10 says this, for God is the one who provides seed for the farmer and then bread to eat. Why on earth would I bring that verse in? God provides seed and He provides bread. Seed and bread both start out the same. They're kernels of wheat. Not all the kernels of wheat are to be seed. Not all of them are to be turned into bread. If you plant all your kernels, you're going to starve. If you eat them all, if you turn them into bread, you have nothing to plant your future harvest for. You got to know which is which. So your money, the money that you earn, part of it's bread and part of it is seed. It's for investing. It's for saving. It's for investing in your future. It's for investing in God's kingdom. It's really important to know how much is what. There's no right answer to this question. A good rule of thumb could be, all right, get $100 in, 80 of it's for me to spend on whatever, $10 I tithe, $10 I invest. This is very much something to pray about. Again, there's not one right answer to this, and it's probably going to change over time. Living in submission to God, really, it requires us that we seek Him about our finances. So seriously, ask Him what He would have you spending on your needs, ask Him what you should be saving, and ask Him what you should be investing in His kingdom, because He will help you do that. You just don't come up with some crazy number. I want to give whatever. Go through it with God, pray about it, and allow Him to lead you in that. All right, last, giving back to God. Malachi 3, 8 through 12 says this. Should people cheat God? Easy answer, no. Should people cheat God? Yet you have cheated me. But you ask, what do you mean? When did we ever cheat you? You have cheated me of the tithes and offerings due to me. You are under a curse, for the whole nation has been cheating me. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. Your crops will be abundant, for I will guard them from insects and disease. I think one translation says, He will rebuke the devourer. Your grapes will not fail from the vine before they are ripe, says the Lord of heaven's armies. Then all nations will call you blessed, for your land will be such a delight. Okay, so the idea here is when we are not generous towards God, when we're stingy towards God, what we're doing is we're taking ourselves out from his covering, we're taking himself out from under his favor and his blessing. And when we're out from under his protection, his favor, his blessing, what we're doing is we're placing ourselves in an area to be cursed. Everybody knows what an umbrella does, right? You have an umbrella, you stand under it, you don't get wet. You walk away from the umbrella, you get wet. Well, when we're in relationship with God, when we're generous towards him, it's kind of like we're standing under that umbrella. We're receiving his protection, we're receiving his blessing. When we choose not to do that, well, we're walking away, we're getting rained on. We actually place ourselves under a curse. Now God, he said in there that the people had cheated him of the tithe. What's a tithe, you might ask? Well, the word tithe, it simply means 1/10 or 10%. Now we see the tithe mentioned the very first time in Genesis chapter 14. Abraham and his 318 trained servants had just defeated the combined armies of 5 kings. And upon returning from this victory, Abraham, he meets Melchizedek, the king of Salem, priest of God Most High, and Abraham gives Melchizedek a tithe, 10% of what he took from these 5 kings. So tithing, what it is, it's simply it's practicing giving God 10% of everything that you receive. Everything that we have belongs to God. So tithing is just giving a percentage back to him. Now in the Old Testament, the people gave their first fruits, the first of their produce, they gave the best of their animals. And there were several different tithes if you look at the Old Testament. They gave a tithe or 10% to the priests and Levites who cared for the temple. Then there was a festival tithe. Okay, so you got 10% of what's left. And then every 3 years there was a tithe to the poor. So the Old Testament tithe, depending on the year, was 20% of everything or 30% approximately of everything. Does that make sense? So tithing, we could say, is giving 10% to God. That's just what the word means, 10%. It's not defined in the Bible. Well, is that gross? Is that net? I kind of feel like it's before taxes, but that's just my own belief. According to what we see in the Bible, when we read the Bibles, we see that the tithe is 10% given to the local church. Any other gifts and offerings are above and beyond the tithe. Now, I've heard people say, okay, so that was in the Old Testament, tithing doesn't apply anymore. And honestly, I think a person could make an argument for that. Obviously, the regulations of the Old Testament are not in effect, at least not in the same way. Like we don't take the first of our harvest and go to the temple in Jerusalem. However, I believe the spirit of tithing is still very much applicable. Matthew 5:21, Jesus said, "You've heard our ancestors were told, don't murder. If you commit murder, you're subject to judgment. But I say if you're angry with someone, you are subject to judgment." A little bit further on, Jesus said, "You've heard the commandment, you must not commit adultery. But I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So Jesus, what he did, he fulfilled the law for us on our behalf. But then he went and he raised the bar a whole lot higher. Basically, he took the law to a new level. And he said, okay, it's not about just doing exactly this. It's a matter of the heart. So tithing in the Old Testament was some exact amounts. I don't believe that's necessarily the case. It's not about an exact amount. I feel like that's the wrong perspective. Really, everything that we have is God's, and we should have hearts that are submitted to him, thankful, generous towards him. And I should have really the idea that everything that I have is his, and I am ready to use the money he's given me however he directs me, whatever that looks like. I don't believe that it's about an exact amount. In the parable of the rich fool, Jesus said this: there was a rich man, he had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops." Then he said, "I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have enough room to store all my wheat and other goods. I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have stored up enough for years to come. Take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. So saving is wonderful, saving for the future. But in that, we need to be generous towards God. We need to be obedient to what he calls us to do. It's no good to, save and be careful with our money, have a large bank account, but not be generous towards God. How many remember the story of Zacchaeus? Was a wee little man was he? So he was a Jewish tax collector. He took taxes from the Jews, gave it to the Romans. On top of that, he took a nice commission for himself. So he was very rich, and everybody hated him. Well, Jesus invited himself to Zacchaeus to his house for lunch, and we see that in that encounter with Jesus, Zacchaeus was changed completely. So in Luke 19, you find that story. Zacchaeus, he stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. Jesus responded, salvation has come to this house today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. So interestingly, Zacchaeus, he demonstrates his salvation in the way he handled his money. We don't see any record of Jesus telling him what to do with his money, but that was the demonstration of the change in his heart. He went from stealing and hoarding to actually repaying people he'd stolen from and giving then to those in need. Stewardship, giving, these things are really important. I honestly believe this, and I know we wouldn't be where we are today had we not been practicing these things. I'm not sharing this because I think, I want you to give. I do, but it's not exactly that. We have just found this is a really important lesson for us. It's so important to live out. When we submit ourselves to God in the area of finances, we put ourselves in a position to be blessed. We put ourselves in a position to receive his favor. And it's not just, I'm getting blessed financially where it can be that. He can bless us in so many other areas. For an individual who is not submitted to God with their finances, and I'm not saying this to put anyone down, but we've chosen to step back very far from him. How we handle our finances, it's such a large area of our life, and there is so much potential when we choose to submit ourselves to him. And again, I'm not saying it doesn't have to be 10%. Actually, it should probably be more than that we're giving to him, but the amount is really not the issue at all. It's really in our heart. Do we trust him? Are we going to him? Are we generous to him? Are we generous to others? We could even ask ourselves, am I giving him my first? Am I giving him my best? Or am I giving him a little bit of tip from whatever my leftovers are at the end of the month? There is a lot of potential as we submit ourselves to God, as we choose to surrender to him, whether it's in finances or how I spend my time or within my relationships, whatever area it is. God, he wants to draw us closer. He wants to bless us. He wants to show us his favor. He wants to protect us. When we're managing God's resources well, even if we're making mistakes, but we're really seeking him, we come to know him as our provider, and really that is the way to live a life of security without fear of the future, because my security, it can't be in what I have, because really that could be gone tomorrow, but it's in knowing God who is continually able to provide for me. So just kind of in summary, wrapping up, stewarding God's money, it looks like giving to God, it looks like providing for my family, taking care of my financial responsibilities. It looks like preparing for the future, giving to those in need, and getting a grip on my finances can look like learning to live within my income, tracking my expenses, making a budget. It looks like saving and investing, and it looks like Tithing, giving back to God. Again, how we handle money, it's not to be like a religious thing, like I've got to do exactly this, but it's about praying, it's about going to God and trusting Him as provider, and really just being obedient to use the resources He has given us so that He can bless us, so that we can then in turn be a blessing to others. If any of this is of interest to you, I have a slide if you want to put that up. This is a really good book. This is written by a pastor in New Jersey, Say Yes to No Debt. He goes through a lot of these principles in a lot more detail. Very good, practical resource if you feel like you want to pursue that. Why don't you stand with me? We're going to pray just to wrap up. Now this morning we took some time. We prayed over every chair in here, praying